I want to thank everyone for their participation on the mailing lists and for actually taking the time to come here. The Bylaws Committee, actually we all happen to be here. My name is Eric Berger. I'm a charter member of the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter and trustee of the Internet Society and the chair of the Bylaws Committee.
That's my cue, apparently. My name is Narelle Clark. I'm a Board of Trustees member of the Internet Society, a member of the Bylaws Committee also. I am also the President of the Australian chapter of the Internet Society, and I was elected to the board by chapters. Thank you.
And Teresa Swinehart should be able to join us in a few moments. So getting into what we're doing today, this is an explicit call for feedback. The proposal that we've sent out does reflect the thoughts of the board, but more importantly, it reflects a starting point. There have been many discussions over the years about addressing issues like the status of chapters. And we felt that until there was something in writing that people could say, I like this, I don't like that, have you thought of something else, that we really were not making progress. These are proposed bylaws. They are not the finished bylaws. Also, something I just remembered, we do have interpretation services. You can listen to this in English, en français, and Espanol. This forum is a high bandwidth forum. We have high quality voice and video in the room. However, we are following IETF principles because not everyone can be at this meeting. And we can at best imperfectly capture verbal discussion, verbal ideas. So we would urge people with comments or suggestions to write them down and send them to the lists. This way it lets everyone be part of the discussion. You'll also notice the entire board, while we have many members of the board here, the entire board is not present. And therefore, we could not make a decision, even if you have the most wonderful idea in the world. We could not make a decision right now, even if we wanted to. And as well, we would need to deliberate on that idea to make a decision. So again, this meeting is discussing and clarifying the changes that have been proposed so far. Of course, you can make substantive suggestions here, but please take those ideas to the list so that everybody can see and participate. I would ask that you hold your questions and comments to the end. We also, since we have remote participation, want to ensure fair access to the floor, so therefore, at least initially, we will be limiting any particular individual's comments to 2 minutes per turn. So if you have 5 questions or comments, please do them one at a time. It's kind of like a TCP algorithm. We want to have fair access. Also, for the interpretation services, please say your name before you make your comment. And likewise, if you're participating remotely, it would be helpful if you were not alphabet jazz at mumble frats, if you could let the people in the monitoring the remote participants give them your name. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So what is the Internet Society? We are a 501c3 charitable organization. For most people, even most people in the United States, I might as well have just gone buzz, buzz, buzz. But in a moment, I'll touch upon why that's important. We are organized for educational, charitable, and scientific purposes. Now, one of the reasons that we've put down and wanted to highlight that we are a 501c3, which is part of the tax code of the United States, is because there are other kinds of 501c organizations, like 501c10, 501c2. These are things like civic leagues, social clubs, social welfare associations, business associations, and unions. So one of the points we want to make here is that we are not organized as an association. We are organized as a charitable organization. There was some discussion, and it's only because we have this high bandwidth thing, because we don't normally respond to the discussions, but there was an issue raised, does being a 501c3 mean that the board dictates everything and nobody gets to say a thing, or that everything must be voted upon by every member? And that is actually up to the organization. In fact, that's the purpose of the bylaws. So that's not to say that it dictates the form, but it is to make clear that we are not an association. We do have members. Members join to support the mission and the vision of the organization. Again, this is an important point because we are not a membership organization. If you look at the Articles of Incorporation, if you look at every set of bylaws from the beginning, if you look at, in fact, the operational behavior of the society, all indicate this explicitly. That does not mean that we do not have members. We can have members. And in fact, the membership does select the Board of Trustees. Again, going back to that 501c3 discussion, there are some 501c3s where the board selects itself and there are no members. Or maybe they may take money, but thank you very much, the board gets to do everything. The decision-making process is thus mission-driven. At the same time, we have our values of being open and transparent, which is why we have transparency and consultation from the members. Why, for example, this is a slow and deliberate process as opposed to, here are the bylaws, hope you like them. Because it would have been much faster for the board to say, here it is, we're done. And that is not following the spirit of the Internet Society. Some basic facts: the Internet Society is incorporated in the District of Columbia in the United States. It's important to understand the difference between the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws. The Articles of Incorporation espouse many of our aspirations. That's where you will find discussion about an open and free Internet. That's where you'll find a discussion about access for all. That's where you'll find a discussion about the different communities and the importance of the different communities to the society. Conversely, the bylaws are the operating manual for the society. So it talks about things like, what are the rules for holding meetings? What are the rules for appointing officers? What are the rules or the roles and duties of the directors and officers? If we go to the next slide, please. So we did take on a two-phase approach. Some people have asked, why are we changing the bylaws at all? For some of the communities of the society, they're quite happy with the way the bylaws are. And it turns out that there were some changes to the laws in the District of Columbia that required change to the bylaws. At the time, because this was driven by some legal requirements, then you have the issue, well, if we're going to open the bylaws, let's really open the bylaws. And what the board decided was there were some easy things to take care of to become in compliance with DC law, and there were some hard discussions that we had to have over membership, and particularly the status of chapters. So rather than hold up the easy stuff and spend, again, this, long deliberative consultative process on chapters, we decided to split it into two phases. The first phase addressing the legal issues, which we did do in 2001. And now that it's open, we're now into phase 2. 2011, right? Thank you. Thank you, Narelle. Now, again, what the goal here is to have the minimal legal specification in the bylaws for maximal flexibility. I'll address that again, actually in the next slide, and also to address the issues of membership. So let's go straight to the next slide. Or the slide after the current one. There we go, thank you. So I've already touched a little bit upon why we're changing the bylaws. Another reason we're doing this, we are making them shorter, with the exception of adding text about chapters. And that's because this is a best practice for bylaws. In a sense, the less you say in the bylaws, the more flexibility you have to grow over time. In fact, we've seen this over a number of the changes that have happened in the past. All of the revisions have made the bylaws smaller. And so, for example, it was a good idea to have separate membership classes for individual members, and the bylaws, in fact, states how much money an individual needs to pay, which is wholly irrelevant with today's evolution of the bylaws. We wanted to reflect realities, again, making things shorter. There were a number of discussions in the bylaws about membership classes that either did not exist or had no function, or committees that had never existed or didn't exist anymore and were not being used. So the goal was to align the bylaws with reality, to recognize chapters for the first time, to recognize organizational members' evolved relationship with the society. So why are we mentioning chapters? Because chapters were never, ever mentioned. Well, for one thing, even though they were never mentioned, they did elect trustees. And we wanted to recognize the chapter's roles, rights, and obligations. We do believe, again, one of our tenets is the principle of self-determination. And so by being brief in the bylaws enables chapters to have their own self-determination. Rather than imposing a particular style of management or self-organization, this enables chapters to basically do what makes sense. And in fact, you heard that on Saturday at the chapter workshop, when the chapters individually worked out what their agenda would be. And in fact, one of the big takeaways was many of the chapters have different agendas because of the realities of their mission, the realities of where they are incorporated. And so this enables chapters to set their own agenda, to build their own work plan, and to have that work plan developed by the chapters, not imposed upon them by the society or by the board. One thing you will notice in the proposal is there was a section on the advisory council, and that's gone. The advisory council in this proposal has been removed. If you look at what the advisory council is, it's a meeting place for the organizational members. In the current bylaws, so what the current bylaws today say is that the chair of the board may establish an advisory council. The composition of that advisory council are the founding members and the high-paying organizational members. If you look at our 130 members, there would only be about 40 members that would meet the qualifications to be on the advisory council as specified by the bylaws. And the advisory council has absolutely no rights, no privileges, no obligations. It is basically an honorific, what is in the bylaws today. So in the proposed bylaws, well, one thing is the board can form committees at any time. So if there's a need to have a formal advisory committee of organizations, we can always form it. And so we remove the reference to this thing in the bylaws called the advisory council, as it is not the current advisory council, and the advisory council in the current bylaws basically does nothing. We also removed the references to founding and pioneer members. Again, these were honorifics that honored those organizations and individual members who have been paying dues for 20 years. And again, they had no rights, no privileges, no obligations. Again, with this concept of less is more, since, in a sense, there's nothing for them in the bylaws, they were taken out. Now, obviously, we will still honor and worship the organization members that have been continuously paying. We will worship those individual members who have been continuously showing their report. Wald is sitting here giggling because she's the one who's got to get the money from them. So we will still certainly honor them. But again, since there's no, from an operations perspective, role, we've taken them out of the bylaws. Could we go to the next slide, please? So some more frequently asked questions. One thing that is of probably great interest to chapters is that we've changed the number of trustees selected by the different communities in ISOC. This is something that the board really struggled with what to do. And so we were guided by an overarching principle, and that is that while the trustee is selected by one of the three pillars of ISOC, they're selected by organizations, through the advisory council, through users and civil society, through chapters, and through the technical community, through the IETF via the IAB. That trustee, once selected, represents the entire ISOC community. In fact, this is explicit in RFC 3677, which is about the IETF selected member, quoting, "The candidate is not a representative or a delegate of the IETF and is not chartered to represent the IETF or the IETF standards process within the ISOC board or the broader ISOC community." And this is pretty much like an oath that we swear to, and pretty much all the trustees have that perspective. And in fact, we have a number of proof points. For example, the advisory council has selected individuals who are not from any organization member. In fact, in recent memory, they've selected individuals who are openly hostile to the idea of someone making money from the internet, which you might say, does that person represent the needs of organizations? Are they going to be out there fighting for, yes, I should be allowed to make money because that's what organization members for the most part do? Well, why were they selected? Was because the organizations, the advisory council, felt that they were the best individuals for the society, not necessarily the person who's going to be out there fighting for organizations' rights. Likewise, there are many times the chapters selected individuals who came from companies that were organization members. And finally, the IETF picks people who happen to come from organizations or happen to not come from organizations. We see this quite a lot. There's another consideration, was that we had pressure and discussions from prior boards to reduce the number of trustees, which was an issue dealing with board governance and actually the ability of the board to get things done. I can report that the current board, especially light of a new committee structure we have, is working okay with 12 members. So reducing the number of members was taken off the table. However, it was hard to justify any allocation of the selection of trustees to anything other than equal. You can think of many justifications if you say, well, we will allocate how we select trustees based on the number of individuals represented by the constituency community. We don't have constituencies, we have communities. And in fact, you may have an answer that's counterintuitive. I would offer organizations probably represent more individuals than chapters do. Do it by geographic reach. Gets you a different answer. Give it by the revenue to ISOC, which frankly was the original model. Well, the revenue structure is kind of turned upside down. You get, again, a counterintuitive answer, not the answer you would expect. Or the source of the Internet Society's legitimacy, that we will say, well, this community is what makes the Internet Society valued in the world, and so therefore there should be more trustees selected from that group. And again, you get different answers depending on who you ask. Is it the IETF, because that's where the Internet comes from? Is it chapters, because they represent civil society? Is it organizations, because they actually make this thing run? And again, you get different answers. And we moved to an equal selection over a 3-year period, a transition period, of selecting the trustees equally. The number of board-appointed trustees. In the old bylaws, the trustees could appoint almost half of the board. And we felt, on the one hand, it was valuable for the Board of Trustees to be able to appoint an individual that could add great value to the society by being on the Board of Trustees. But we also felt that it was basically not appropriate for the board to essentially take control of the society on its own without the direct input, and in this case the input is through the selection of trustees of the different communities. So in the new bylaw proposal, the trustees can appoint a maximum of 3 board-appointed trustees, which is never going to be more than community selected, and in a sense is not enough to steal the board. Finally, talking about the DC law, one of my first thoughts, speaking personally here, when we started this bylaw process, especially since it was legal issues that made us open the bylaws in the first place, was let's get out of DC. And it actually enabled us to look at other venues. And we looked at venues, numerous venues in Europe, Geneva, Brussels, London, Asia, Africa, Latin America. And what we discovered, and I'm sure you will all be shocked to this, every jurisdiction has something special. There is something that is not ideal in every jurisdiction. There is no ideal jurisdiction. That, coupled with the fact that it's very expensive to move the Internet Society out of the district, and that we get many benefits, not the least is which a very preferential tax treatment, which means more money for programs. And there are other laws that protect the society. We decided to stay in the district. And other changes, like the status of chapters, would be the same no matter what venue we were in. You know, these are important issues getting to the structure of the Internet Society. So with that, we'd like to open up discussion. Again, a reminder, we do want to have fair access to the floor, so please limit your questions or comments to 2 minutes. For the transcription service, please say your name before making your comments. Yep. And there's a mic. Well, actually, if you could move to a microphone, because we do, that's another reminder, we do have remote participants, so it is very important to speak into the microphone. Today, there are, and again, we can answer clarifying questions. If you say it should be, we clearly cannot answer that. Today, there are 6 trustees selected by organization members, 3 trustees selected by chapters, and 3 trustees selected by the IETF.
Thank you, Eric, for your explanations.
Could I have your name, please?
Oh, sorry, my name is Klaus Birkenbiel. I'm treasurer of the German chapter, and, well, you will see that there's some interest in financial interest in what I'm saying. So there are a few questions that came up in the discussion that you didn't cover, and I wonder if I should take my time to repeat them. The first is the question, what's the ultimate authority of the organization? And what we usually see in business and in associations and what have you, that the ultimate authority is the membership in what way ever. There are some exceptions, I admit, like Catholic Church and some other institutions, but I think in democratic societies, usually members are those who have the last say. And I don't think that this is the case with the new bylaws, since there's a group of people that is not associated to members that haven't a say at all. The second thing, and now I come to my not only financial thing, is what I see is a separation of org members and personal members. And, well, in one way it complicates our work, or would complicate our work if we would conform to it. Because, of course, there is some interest in org members to cooperate on a regional level, and there's some interest to cooperate with the experts that are personal members. So, and the place to do that, or the forum that we give them, is a chapter. So, and also, internal communication is somehow jeopardized by this separation because, hey, we have two lists to discuss the bylaws, one for the org members and one for the others. So how do we exchange arguments between both groups? I think this is very important if we discuss the bylaws. So it splits the organization in first class and second class citizens. And I wonder if this is something that reflects the spirit of the internet. So with respect from a chapter, and I know this applies for many others too, it is a very urgent requirement for us to find a decent way to integrate org members into the chapter structure. We have even other models. I see the head of the Israel chapter sitting there. Well, they are a company at the end of the day, and I wonder if they have to exclude themselves from the chapter. This might be a tricky thing. So my plea is change things, more democracy and more internal communication and better facilities for regional work. Thank you.
So I'll address the list issue, and Narelle will address the org versus chapter issue. A number of individuals were very concerned, and not board individuals, but individuals in the different communities were concerned about past interactions where, frankly, some people, yeah, we lost the captioning. Or did he go out for lunch? Okay, anyway, that at least initially, there was a desire to keep the discussions amongst the communities separate. And another very real issue is that someone may have a good idea, but when someone from a different community says, oh, that's from that individual, it can't be a good idea. Or conversely, oh, it's from that individual, it must be a good idea. What's supposed to happen, and staff is supporting this, is summarizing the discussions on the various lists and reposting that summary of the issues raised, both so that the different communities can see what the other communities consider to be important issues, and likewise, so you can see what's being said. So there's a check on that the staff has adequately reflected your issues. Narelle, do you want to?
Sure. If I can go to that question about organisational members and chapter members, and where are the natural affinities, perhaps, for organisations, as in commercial organisations typically, maybe not-for-profits, whether they should be members of ISOC globally as organisational members, or whether they should be members at the chapter level. In my view, there is nothing that stops them from being a member of one or the other, or both. And I would strongly suggest that it should be up to the particular organisation themselves to determine where their closest affinity is. I know that we in the Australian chapter have taken a great deal of benefit from our relationships with certain other organisations that are members of ISOC globally. And at the local level, we cooperate, we run events on their premises, we have some tremendous cooperation, and we benefit a great deal, and we hope that they benefit a great deal too. So in that sense, from the bylaws context, I don't think we're trying to peel out one or the other as being a first-class or a second-class citizen rather, but really to recognise that there are different qualities of each and different emphases of each. I hope that runs at least somehow towards answering the question. Although originally you started with a question that was, who is the ultimate authority? Was it who is the ultimate authority? That was the very first. So who is the ultimate authority, or where does that ultimate authority lie? Is it the members? Is it the board? Is it the senior executive staff? Is it the CEO? My assessment of that at this stage, that authority lies at different levels for different things at different times. Maybe that's not the most precise answer.
No, well, actually, this is one where there's going to be a lot of deliberation. You know, it's very clear what's there now, but this is a place of deliberation which is not really appropriate for us to, you know, we're here listening. Patrick, I've got Patrick, Olivier, and Hans-Peter, and Christopher. And we've got Sebastian. Oh, Sebastian was really next? Oh, great, I missed that. Thank you so much, Narelle. Sebastian, and then Patrick.
Thank you. I have the impression that part of the difficulty is word you are using, and when Eric, you talk about chapter, you talk about chapter as a civil society. And I want to challenge that because I see ISOC globally as a multi-stakeholder organization, and maybe one of the first one. And if it's so, that means that a chapter is not civil society. There are civil society members within the chapter, but it could be have other members from the governmental side, from the business side. And that's, I would like very much that we don't characterize a chapter as civil society. This came to the second point. In the proposed bylaw, ISOC individual member, but as a previous speaker asked about the org, if we have org member at the local level, it's not deal here in the bylaw. Then I guess we need to tweak this document a little bit to allow a company at the national level or local level to be member of the chapter. As the governmental people could be also, then it must be open. And I would like to make one I would say radical proposal. It's to ask all the individuals to be member of the chapter and to kick out this category of member at the worldwide level of the organization. I think it could be a better way to have this ISOC is to gather people together, not to leave them alone. Then give them a tool to do that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Patrick.
Thank you very much. To a large degree, I agree with what Sebastian was saying. So Patrick Feldstrom, net node, we're an organizational member on gold level. Let me start by saying that. First of all, I'm deeply concerned when you say that chapters are a civil society, because I really thought that ISOC was a multi-stakeholder organization. And even saying that by mistake, so it ends up in the transcript. And
yeah, and in the bylaws it doesn't say that.
Let me finish. While your clarifications does not end up in the transcript because it's not transcribed, what we're currently doing is something that I think is raising my concerns. So, but Sebastian already brought that up. Secondly, I just want to have a clarification. What you presented is also what I read, that organizational members will select fewer seats and the advisory council is no longer recognized in the bylaws. That's clarification I would like to have, even though sort of like ourselves are sponsors of ISOC on gold level. The third thing that I have a question about specifically, as we are donating quite a lot of FTEs in the form of the IETF tool service support to the IETF. One thing that you said regarding the IETF makes me interpret your statement as if the IETF today is cash flow positive. Can you clarify on that, please?
We're certainly not telling organizations to go to hell. And we're trying not to turn, in fact, some people might interpret that, we should have chapters as first-class citizens and organizations as second-class citizens, and that's also not the intention. The IETF is not cash flow positive. By the same token, without the IETF, ISOC would not pass the public support test. It is the largest source of income. And the last, sorry, Patrick, what was the last clarification?
It was just a clarification, and you nodded, so that is enough for me regarding the changes to the bylaws regarding the number of seats that org members select together with the AC. Thank you.
And just a reminder, the AC that was removed from the bylaws does not, or has not been constituted for a very long time.
Thanks very much, Eric. Olivier Crépin-Leblanc. I'm with the English chapter, but I'll be speaking on my own behalf. I am going to leave the questions to others. I see everyone has got tons of questions. I just wanted to say one thing that absolutely raised my boiling level. The idea of putting chapters on one side and organization on the other and discussing with them in silos is something which is really 20th century thinking. We are in 2012. You have to wake up. These days, everyone talks with everyone. There is one internet, there is one internet society, and there should be ways of all of the members, whether it's organizations or the chapters, to be able to talk to each other. Thinking that you have to go via some kind of moderator between them is either looking at your members as being immature and not being able to talk to each other, or a measure of trying to hold on to power. Thank you.
Hans-Peter?
Hans-Peter Dittler from the German chapter. First thing, I'm not here to do a revolution, even if some people think it. I'm here to push for evolution of the whole thing. So I'm very grateful that the discussion on bylaws was opened and is open, and I think several pieces are perfect, nice, good, but in the end, I still have the feeling that we have to work on it. And let's start with things like, you talked several times about having less text in the bylaws is better for flexibility. Absolutely correct. We do the same in German law, we do the same thing. But at the same time, having less text in the bylaws increases the uncertainty of all who are relying on those bylaws. Not writing things there means you have to ask for them. Not having the possibility to read things if you come to the website means you have first to talk people what's going on behind the curtain. Everything which is not written clearly here means you have to ask for, which makes things sometimes a little bit cumbersome. Okay. Second point, I got the feeling that you are moving many details out of the bylaws into other papers, like minimum requirements for chapter behavior or rules for running a General Assembly of org members. I think that's good practice to make things easier and need lesser lawyers. But at the same time, it's opening up a very easy path to do unilateral modifications to it. If it's a written paper, up to staff to change it, we have to believe that everybody is doing its best, and we believe it, and everybody is doing it now. But everything can happen, and in 3 years, somebody is on staff who writes in the conduct of chapters, you have to throw over your local government and or to wear blue shoes. We are obliged to do it. I think there should be much more anchor in the bylaws already that those fundamental things couldn't be changed without major voting at the board or whatever. And then we have to find a third clause to make all these things very clear, very prominently visible, clear, who does what. You are talking about several times today, we are a course-based organization and everything above it, fine. We heard for 3 days now nice speeches, great speeches, by the way, and every time we heard, you are the chapters, you are the members, you are driving things, but I don't find too much of it echoed here, at least in some foreword of the bylaws or anywhere else. It's nice to be recognized as this in speeches, especially if it's a nice party like yesterday evening, but in a day-to-day life, I also want to be asked before a position rains down on me from Reston and I have to go to my government and be part of this position. I think we need much, 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 much more communication. We need much more openness to go with Olivier. I think I get a feeling of being mistrusted by things like having separate mailing lists. Why? Keep it open, keep it visible at least. Even if necessary, keep the writing right to the mailing list separated, but keep it open so everybody can really see you and trust you. Otherwise, we always have a problem, what's going on behind the curtain. Yeah, that's for now. And I will try to make more prominent and more direct points written to the list. It's not possible to do it on this occasion. Thanks.
A quick clarification there. I think I'm hearing that we certainly need a lot more clarity on roles and delegations, perhaps. One other thing is, would you be more satisfied if we could separate things more clearly into policy documents? And we had more, I mean, that I believe is the principle of it, that we would be separating other things into policy areas which we could then hash out however long it took in whatever policy area it was, and then if that then triggered a bylaws change, it triggered a bylaws change. But keep the bylaws as an overarching, and I'll leave that to you, go back to you.
I've got Christopher, John, Raquel. Is there anybody in the chat rooms? No, okay. Yeah, I've got you, but it's going to be Christopher first. And if this has had a history, if we could remove a certain civil society statement, that would be great. It would be great to be able to rewrite history. Christopher, please.
Thank you. Christopher Wilkinson, Internet Society Chapter of Belgium, Wallonia. To be very brief, my initial comments have been posted to the list, and I suggest they be considered, particularly since Olivier made the point. You know, I found I had to post to all 3 lists, which was a bit cumbersome. I can go a long way with the positions that have been and advice that has been recently circulated on the list, particularly from John Moore and Klaus Birkenbill and Norbert Klein. So I would hope that you would also look at those carefully. Regarding our points that have not yet been quite brought out, I do think that the opportunity should be taken to recognize chapters as legal entities in most cases in their national jurisdictions as full members per se. And particularly if it is important, and I think it is, that individual members and organizational members associate themselves with their local chapter. I sought, and I haven't yet really found, an improved balance between the chapter participation and the organizational and IETF participation. I think quite a few people in the room are looking for a better balance. I know you've gone a little way in that direction, but perhaps not quite far enough. Among the chapters, because they are a global phenomenon, I think it would be fair to provide in the bylaws, as is done in other organizations, an appropriate assurance of geographical diversity. This is important, and I think it needs to be looked at. Finally, although I haven't commented in writing about this, since the question of authority did come up, on the one hand, I'm quite happy with chapters being certified by ISOC and meeting the standards of performance, but I'm not at all happy about a completely open-ended provision not clarifying who decides on such certification. This issue came up with the letters of affiliation, which had sanctions but no dispute resolution process. So it must be made quite clear. And as you know, the chapters, many chapters have difficulties with the present proposal for a letter of affiliation, and consequently, I would seek clarification in that part of the bylaws. Other comments will be forthcoming in writing after appropriate consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I've got John, I've got you, and so far, okay, well, John.
I will just speak briefly. I think the direction in which the bylaws are going is good. I have made some suggestions. I am a community organizer. I'm used to organizing people in providing influence in a body where the ultimate trust has to be that the board of directors, which has the overseeing, will do the right thing. So your vote goes to the board of directors, and they need to be tested. If they don't meet it, then there are means, including a wholesale revolt of the chapters, so that having a detailed discussion of exactly what should be done in a bylaws does not make sense. Having full disclosure of how the operation will be through the procedural with open discussion is a way to go. And the only two other things that I am sort of devoted to the idea, one is that there should be a provision in the bylaws dealing with decertifying a chapter in the last instance with due process, and I would suggest only upon a vote of the Board of Trustees, not done by the staff. And the other is that there be an annual meeting of the chapters, because I think one of the great things we had this time was the chapter workshops and the diversity and just the opportunity to get together on a regular basis. And I would also suggest that that would provide a discipline that chapters would need. Know that once a year they would be coming together and seeing each other and working together. And with that, I applaud the direction, but I think there's some things that can be done.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Yesha. That's Y-E-S-H-A. I'm from the Israeli chapter. I'm the president of Israel ISOC. Let me start by saying that the internet is maturing, and therefore the change of the bylaws of ISOC makes a lot of sense. I think that chapters are important. I'm not sure this change is actually stating that in a clear way. I second the idea that chapters should be the link to all the stakeholders, including governments and organizations and businesses and individuals and civil society, etc. And they should be really the ISOC people in the ground in the various places, various nations. However, and this is a big however, I would like to see some of the budget actually go there. And it seems to me that now the chapters are simply extremely weak and incapable of actually doing anything meaningful. I mean, I looked at There was a notice there a couple of weeks ago about some event in New York. It seems to me like a very nice thing, and apparently 3 people came. So this does not look good on the resume of ISOC in general, and doesn't make sense. So I would urge everything to be much clearer in terms of how much budget actually go and to which of the various chapters. And at the end of the day, there are going to be much less chapters. Or maybe there are going to be 2 categories, real chapters and wannabe chapters, or something like that. Because some of the chapters that we have now are not more than just a bunch of 3 people talking to each other. And I'm not sure that's a good thing for ISOC and for the mission of the internet, the complexities that we have today. Thank you very much.
Sure, thanks. Carlos, and then I'll come over here.
Thank you. May I speak in Spanish, please? Gracias.
And the interpreters.
Gracias. Bueno.
As I see it, the Internet society as such exists before chapters began to exist, and some chapters began to exist before we were officially recognized as such, or even before we applied to be chapters of Internet society. So a project such as this that socializes the construction of the drafting of the new bylaws is something fantastic, really, because it let us take part as we wanted to. Initially, I had included a note saying that bylaws must be general enough so that for each change in the working of the society must go through the legal government procedures, which are also always very complicated. The way to construct a society, including the election of members and members of the governing bodies, etc., must be in the bylaws. But we must also remember how the procedure should be amended, should be modified with time. This should be included in a lower level text that can be modified, and an assembly such as this, it's not an assembly, in fact, because we're not present, not all of us are, not all of that should be present are present, but we should meet somehow in order to propose a new mechanism. I have been here for 13 years already as an ISOC chapter, and I think this new attitude is quite positive. We have the support that we didn't have before. For 5 years, we've been having people working in our region. We have more resources, we have more means, and of course we ask for more participation every time when we have more means and more resources. But I think that the participation of chapters should follow the general purpose of an internet society that is growing every day. It's very different from what it was 15 years ago. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Carlos. Desiree?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Committee of Bylaws for being here and opening this meeting to the AC members as well who are present here. So we appreciate that. I would also like to say that I speak as an elected co-chair of the Advisory Council. 2 years ago, my colleague Keith Davison, Theresa Swineherd, myself were running for the advisory election of officers, and therefore all members have voted following the advisory charter that exists and the rules and requirements of the organization. So I would say that we find it quite an unexpected change not to suddenly be recognized in the current bylaws draft. In addition to that, for the sake of transparency, to share with the chapters, here at this meeting, there has not been a substantial discussion, as you know, on the AC members list about the changes of bylaws. And one of the reasons for having not much discussion, we did have a meeting after the ITF in Paris a couple of weeks ago, where you kindly also talked us through the proposed, not through the proposed changes, but to the, now you have alerted us that the draft is coming. The reason there has been not much of a substantial discussion could be for several reasons, but one of them, we do have a separate mailing list outside of AC members that is an additional step for members to join and then start a discussion. But I think one of the reasons that is more really describing the lack of any discussion is certainly a lack of transparency why the change is needed. We would appreciate more details about the legal advice that you've been given about the changes in the District Court of Columbia in order to make a fair input how that affects the organization. As you can understand, most of these organizations also have their legal counsels within their organization and would like to go through that. So we'd appreciate more of details in that matter. Secondly, I'm not going to make any comments. I think there are good parts in the draft that the committee has presented. But we will wait for the members who, once they feel strongly and once they feel confident, to give you a better input of what they see is needed. Thank you.
Desiree, can I just have a clarification? The transcript wasn't quite clear and I didn't quite hear you, so I apologise. Are you saying that, as from the AC perspective, it was expected there would be changes to the bylaws, or it was unexpected?
What I said, it was unexpected. We have it on the agenda in the Paris meeting first, so we were looking for the draft that came afterwards. But I think that it's normal to expect that there will be a review of bylaws at some point. What I'm saying is there's a lack of understanding exactly why the changes are required, what sort of changes need to be made, in addition to board organizing the selection of trustees. So more details on that front, I think.
Actually, even though it's not supposed to be interactive, I'll do one interactive question or clarification. The first phase of the bylaws changes were driven by legal considerations. This second phase, where legal considerations obviously come to pass, because trust me, what you've seen has gone before a lawyer, an outside counsel, because we don't want to do anything that's counter to rules. But these changes now, which are talking about membership, are not driven by legal requirements. They're driven by, like, the fact that chapters haven't existed, and we wanted to recognize chapters. So that's not that the law says we must have chapters, but, you know, so now are you, is it that you're concerned that these changes were driven by legal stuff, or you would like to actually see what drove phase one?
I think it would be good to have a summary of the legal requirements, and secondly, I think it should be an organisation-driven change of bylaws. So it just seems a little bit top-down.
Sorry, I really do feel the need to respond. I apologise if that's out of line. But what was put to us before mid last year was a set of proposed changes that had come from the lawyers, and a lot of it was to encompass things that were required tidying up in the bylaws to support requirements within somewhere in the United States. Sorry. That at that time, it was also flagged that there was no recognition in the bylaws of an area of our work, our constituency, and I'm not afraid to use that term, of which is the chapters. And while I must say I do value our organisational members and the contribution that they have made over the last 20 years, it has been tremendous. But also as a chapter member over the last 20 years of one of the founding chapters, to not be recognised to me was a huge anomaly. And as far as I saw it at the time, it was important for us to meet our legal obligations and get the legal obligations sorted out quick, smart, and then move to the next phase where we could have a proper discussion about the incorporation of proper recognition of our various membership groups. I'll stop now before I get too impassioned.
And Sebastian gets the last word, and then I'll close because we have a session starting in about 4 minutes.
Thank you. I was not intended to be the last one, but I think since few years I was looking to the Advisory Council for the org, and I was always thinking why the chapter didn't get the same. And the reason is the following: as soon as you become board trustee, you forget where you come from. I don't think you can forget totally, but you are supposed to be on behalf of the whole organization and not on behalf of one or the other constituency. It's quite tricky, and I can tell you that it's difficult for me in the ICANN board to do that. But nevertheless, that means that we need a way to coordinate what the chapter can say and how they say, how they work. The only organization today who does that, it's for the org member, it's the Advisory Council. I am not asking for the same name, but I am asking for the same type of organization. And if it's possible, then it could be interesting to have that back in the bylaw with these two Advisory Council, with the today definition for both of them, and it will be useful to have the voice of each part of the organization before the board. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, now the very, very, very last, Alejandra.
And apologies for for keeping here. I think this is a very good start for the discussion. I was part of the board. I was a trustee when this discussion first came up. There were some tweaks proposed to the organization beyond the strictly legally needed things, and I was among those who moved for an open process for the bylaws review. I think we can move it forward. I'm very glad that you are doing something as open as this as trustees, and I have all praise for that. There's going to be a lot of loose ends when we close in a couple of minutes. The whole balance between organizational members and chapters and the IETF will still be pending. I think we all have to hear from all parts. I don't think there's any opposition, any confrontation, certainly, between advisory, IETF, and chapters. On the contrary, I would have one answer to your question: what gives us our legitimacy besides the good work of ISOC? What will give ISOC its legitimacy will be a well-architected organization. The architecture is going to be the legitimacy. It's not that you represent well the voice of the organizational members. It's not that you cover for the IETF. It's not that you have chapters. But the way we interact has to be one in which we strengthen each other. So when we bring this down in a practical way, I mean, as chapters, we will be a loose association of loonies very easily if we are not kept in check by the fact that we have to have an organization that's functional for the organizational members, for example, and the other way around. Also, the chapters can make more extreme statements, can explore more creative space in certain types of ideas than the organizational members, for example. So, as a next step, I think that the guiding principle has to be, first, good architecture. Second, form follows function. Let's have a good discussion in the coming days. What do we want for us to happen? Physiology drives anatomy. Form follows function. What do we want to happen? And then how to build us up. And as a practical process, I think that we could look at an upcoming meeting of few people. We can distill who these would be, including both chapters and organizational members and the IETF, so that it's not only the board, because the board already is those parts, but it's like board plus to look at this more practically and leave the fine detail, the small wordings to the real end. Make sure that first we really find a way to live together between these three sectors and then put it in paper.
Thank you, Alejandro. And from what you're about to hear me say, I did not pay him to say that. But we really, really would like to get your feedback. And again, because this is a strange hour from people in Australia. I doubt we have any people listening to the live stream unless they have insomnia.
9 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, okay, they're probably there. So it's probably bad for India. It's bad for India. So the point being is not everyone can be here in a face-to-face or even live stream thing. So please bring your comments to the list. I would ask that since the bylaws and frequently asked questions and red line and these discussions have been going on for a few weeks, that you get your comments in by May 5th, the 5th of May. That does not mean that comments close at the 5th of May. But we actually do have a board meeting coming up, and it would be nice to have a set of things to talk about. And also, we all know if there's no deadline, you'll get to it someday, and then be upset when we haven't had your input or you send it in the day before our board meeting and we don't get to really deliberate on it. So please get your feedback by May 5th. The expectation is that there will be changes. Again, the whole purpose of this was to put something out so that people could say, I hate that, that makes my blood boil, we hate you, we love you, and come to a better process. I want to explicitly thank Olivier and John, who not only have commented on these bylaws, but have actually sent proposed text, proposed clarifications, proposed fixes. That's incredibly helpful. Yes, thank you. And since we did get to have Carlos speak, I'd like to thank the interpreter for picking up in the middle of nowhere and having to deal with both technology and legal language. So thank you all very much. I look forward to interacting on the lists.
And feel free to approach us in person while we're still here.
And thanks to you, of course, and to ISOC staff for putting this together at such short notice. Thank you.
Thank you.